Welcome, everyone, to the May 2024 Planning Commission Agenda Review Meeting. We have a light schedule today, and at this time, I'll turn it over to Director Brooks.
Thank you, Chairman. Good morning, everyone. I just have a few updates. I guess first of all, I want to introduce you all to Kelsey Bosquet. I think I pronounced her. I'm always afraid I'm going to butcher her name, but Kelsey has been with us for a little over a week now, and we're really excited to have her. So you all will see her at these meetings. She'll be working on rezonings and then eventually probably some development plan review and be assisting us with telecommunication reviews as well. We don't get those very often, but when we do, Kelsey will begin assisting Lindsay Crockett with those. So welcome.
Thank you.
Okay, so this year's edition of the Development Activity Report is about to be released. It should be live on our website, if not today, in the next couple days. So this is a summary of construction investments, rezoning, subdivision approvals over the last year. And so key takeaways from this year's report is we've seen a 30% increase in the number of building permits issued. This is driven heavily by apartment construction. We've also seen some record-breaking investment in general in our area. So for the first time, we'll be exceeding $1 billion in single-year residential construction. And some of the highest priced projects are the Live apartment complex in South Knoxville at $81.5 million, followed closely by the multi-use stadium at $80 million. Again, our website will be updated, and we'll send you a link to that as well. We have kicked off the Areas of Opportunity Mapping project. You've heard me mention this a couple different times, but this is a project that we're working on with the city, and it's focused on transit-oriented development. So we'll be talking a lot about this over the next 6 to 8 months. And the county's first comprehensive land use and transportation plan was recently passed. We're very excited to hit that milestone, and planning staff have been working over the last 2 weeks with KGIS to ensure all of our online maps are updated to reflect the new plan designation. So that is now live on planning cases. And we're also working on updating all of our applications and schedules. The plan amendments in the county will be heard quarterly. The first amendments to the new plan can be heard at the August 8th Planning Commission meeting. Now, we're in this transition period, so a lot of the applications that will be before you for the next couple months are submitted under the old plans, and so that's how we will review them. So that might, hopefully that's not too confusing, but we'll try to lay that out as clearly as possible in our staff reports. But it is required at the time of application that we provide a recommendation based on the plans that were in effect at that time. If you guys have any questions about that, please feel free to ask as we're reviewing cases, or feel free to give me a call. In July, I'd like to have a training session with the Planning Commission. Ideally, we could meet an hour in advance of your agenda review. We can have a discussion about if that time works for you all, but what I'd like to focus on at that meeting is reviewing the new plan and what plan amendments will look like, the new criteria, kind of get you all up to speed on that, answer any questions that you have, and then we'll just do some general training that we try to do once a year related to conflict of interest and other matters that I'll let Ms. Blakeney identify over the next month or so. So hopefully that works for you all. If not, these are training items that we can talk about at other meetings as well. And so those are all my updates. Anything you want to add? Okay, so we'll jump into the agenda review. So item number 16 is our first agenda item. It's 5J24RZ. And this is Whitney's case, I believe. Are we starting with number 18? 5L24RZ, or was that one? Okay. No.
So I can start with item 18, 5L 24RC. And this rezoning request is for the 13-acre property on Harvey Road. The applicant has requested to go from agricultural to PR up to 5 dwelling unit per acre. The property is located at the western edge of Knox County on the northwest side of Harvey and South North Shore intersection. The area is predominantly zoned agricultural and PR with densities ranging from 2 to 3.5 dwelling units per acre. The Planning Commission approved a PR rezoning in January for the eastern property that you can see in here. The land use classification of the Southwest County Sector Plan is LDR, which permits consideration of PR zoning up to 5 dwelling unit per acre in the county's planned growth area. The general development pattern in the immediate area consists of small lot detached subdivisions. There is a commercial node less than 1 mile east at the intersection of Choto Road and South North Shore Drive. From aerial view, we can see that Loudoun County has similar development to the west. The subject property is an undeveloped forested land. There is a blue line stream that essentially splits the property in two halves. The western portion can potentially be accessed by this tap out from the adjacent subdivision. The eastern portion is relatively flat and more likely to accommodate the entire density allowed. The eastern property, for which the Planning Commission approved a density of 3 dwelling per acre, does not have any such constraints. Like Amy mentioned, while the sector plan was the active plan at the time of this request, the property has the rural living place type under the recently adopted comprehensive plan. This allows consideration of the PR zone with a density of up to 2 dwelling unit per acre. Staff recommends approving the PR zone with up to 2 dwelling unit per acre since this would be consistent with the development pattern of the surrounding area. PR zone is supported by the sector plan. The recommended density of 2 dwelling unit per acre considers the accessibility and environmental constraint of this site. At the recommended density, a maximum of 26 dwelling units could be built. Happy to answer any questions.
What was the, remind me, last month, I should know this, it was just 30 days ago, but southwest of this at the intersection of Harvey and North Shore, there was a similar track that had the blue line stream going through it. Yeah, that one right there. What was the recommendation on it from staff, and what did we end up doing on that?
So that was a concept plan and development plan application. The rezoning happened, I forgot the exact date, but it was probably more than 20 years ago. I may be wrong, but yeah, it was zoned PR at 3, as it was actually part of the this subdivision, the Oak subdivision. So entire property was zoned. I forgot the date, but the recent case was just a development plan and concept plan.
Thank you.
Has there been a traffic analysis study for this? Because I've been in that area a lot and traffic is terrible and the roads are crumbling.
So as part of this application, it is not required. At the recommended density of 5 dwelling per unit, the estimated traffic is 698, which does not trigger the traffic impact analysis.
Director Stone, did you want to weigh in?
Yeah, I'll speak to that. We're working with Cannon and Cannon right now to do, as part of the approval through the town of Farragut of the growth policy plan, the county committed to doing a small area traffic study for the entirety of the Shodo Peninsula. So the intersection of Harvey at Shodo, as well as the north-south and east-west connectivity, will be looked at later this year, and then our capital budget will be informed in future years to kind of identify some of the issues that we're seeing out there in that community.
Good. I had a clarification question, and I don't know who this would be directed to, but I know Director Brooks, you had mentioned that this application was reviewed under the old sector plans, and since we've just gotten the rest of it approved, but this is, I guess, could pertain to here, but it doesn't maybe necessarily yet. But moving forward, I had a question about how this area is in the growth sector and the growth policy plan, right? I mean, it's in planned growth area. However, does have the overlay of rural living. So I guess there's a question in my mind. I'm trying to understand for sure what is in rural living, what's the maximum density moving forward that will be allowed in rural living?
Under rural living, you can consider up to 2 dwelling units per acre.
Okay, and that's what I was trying to clarify, because it's in the planned growth, but I know through the negotiations and talking with Farragut and everybody, I know a lot of that stuff until some of the traffic maybe gets worked out. But I was just more of a clarification, but recognizing also that it wasn't reviewed necessarily under that yet.
Okay, thank you, Samuel. We will move on to agenda item number 16. We're going to switch computers now. We are on 5J24RZ. This is also Masana Investments.
Okay, this is a rezoning request from agricultural to planned residential up to 5 dwelling units an acre on 5.38 acres. It's adjacent to an existing subdivision, Cooper Meadows, northwest of East Emory Road, east of Brackett Road. And this plan, was submitted under the sector plans rather than the new one. The sector plan low density residential land use classification considers up to 5 dwelling units an acre in the county's planned growth area. At the requested density of 5 dwelling units an acre, this property could have up to 26 dwellings. At the recommended density of 4 dwelling units an acre, a maximum of 21 units can be built. The subject property's access is from Cooper Meadows Lane, which is a public road in the existing subdivision that's zoned planned residential up to 4 dwelling units an acre. Therefore, staff is recommending a density of 4 dwelling units an acre to be compatible with the existing development it'll share a road width. Since the mid-90s, there have been some agricultural to planned residential rezonings at densities ranging from 3 to 5 dwelling units an acre in the area. The general trend along East Emory Road consists of small and medium-sized lots of single-family detached residential houses and large agricultural tracts. Houses, duplexes, multi-dwelling structures are permitted in the PR zone. The PR zone requires development plans to be submitted prior to the property is 1.5 miles from a commercial node at Tazewell Pike and East Emory Road. Within the last 5 years, Tazewell Pike and East Emory Road intersection were widened. Both were previously 2-lane roads. Now it consists of 4 lanes. And just north, there's Gibbs Middle School, elementary, and high schools. The future land use map classifies this as suburban residential, which considers the planned residential zone up to 12 dwelling units an acre. It's predominantly single-family subdivisions with lots smaller than 1 acre, attached residential such as duplexes, multiplexes, and townhomes at the scale of a single-family home. And the recommendation is to approve PR up to 4 dwelling units an acre as it's consistent with the sector plan and surrounding development. Any questions?
Okay, thank you, Jeff. Thank you, Whitney. Okay, now we'll move on to Jesse, item number 13. It's also Masana Investments. It's a sector plan and rezoning.
Okay, item number 13, this is 5E24RZ, 5A24SP, county rezoning and plan amendment from agricultural to planned residential up to 12 dwelling units per acre. This is a partial rezoning. The other portion of this parcel is RB. 5630 Millertown Pike. This is a minor arterial street, and the property is situated just northeast of its intersection with I-640. The subject area is approximately 6.24 acres, and it borders the city jurisdiction line, shown in yellow. And it's located in the urban growth area of the growth policy plan. So at the time that this application was taken in, the request for 12 dwelling units per acre required a sector plan amendment from low-density residential to medium-density residential. With the new county comprehensive plan, this area is suburban residential as the place type, which does permit consideration of PR up to 12 dwelling units per acre. The portion of the property that is excluded from this rezoning request, as I said, is zoned RB. You can see that that is the predominant zoning to the east. RB zoning permits by right a residential density of up to 12 dwelling units per acre. There is PR zoning that abuts the subject property on the west side with a density of 3 dwelling units per acre, and the highest planned residential density in this area is 6 dwelling units per acre, and that's to the northwest. Nearby to the west, you'll see a large regional commercial node with some industrial zoning as well around I-640. The extensive RB zoning is not reflective of existing residential development, which is comprised of low-density single-family subdivisions or individual single-family residences on lots of a half acre or more. The requested PR district up to 12 dwelling units per acre would permit consideration of up to 74 units on this property, which would be out of character with the surrounding development. This rezoning request came well, according to the new future land use map, the place type for this property, which you can see in the left-hand corner, is suburban residential, which does permit the request of PR. Currently, though, at the time this was received, it required consideration of medium-density residential. As you can see, there's not much medium-density residential in this area. It's predominantly low-density residential. And so the RB zoning that is so prevalent here is also out of sync with the land use plan. In the aerial imagery, you can see there is ongoing residential development in this area. There's been a significant conversion of farmland and forest to residential subdivision development. The Meadows of Millertown subdivision was completed around 2009 to the east of the subject property. There's the Rushland Park subdivision to the northeast that was constructed in 2018. And you can see ongoing construction of the Clear Spring Plantation subdivision to the south. In the close-up image of the property on the right-hand side, you can see that there are significant overhead utilities. Maybe you can't see, but there are significant overhead utilities that cover about half of this property along the east and south sides. There's also a blue line stream along the southeast corner leading to Loves Creek. Staff are recommending approval of PR up to 9 dwelling units per acre instead of 12. This provides a transition of residential intensity between the vacant RB zoning to the east and the 12 dwelling units with its 12 dwelling units permitted by right, and the small subdivision to the west with PR zoning up to 3. The presence of overhead utilities and the blue line stream restrict the developable area. This makes PR an appropriate zone to consider because it permits that flexibility to cluster development in the optimal areas of the property. However, the scale and massing of development being concentrated on about half the property could result in a form that's out of character with the surrounding area, and that is why there's a condition for a 12-foot Class B landscape screen or to retain existing comparable vegetation along the western border to reduce the impact of this more intensive potential development. A density of 9 dwelling units per acre would permit up to 56 units, which is supported by the numerous residential amenities that are in the area, in addition to the large service-oriented commercial node to the west. There's also the potential for an employment hub with the Amazon warehouse that's currently inactive there. The lot is near a transit line and bus stop. It's also near a planned expansion of the Loves Creek Greenway Trail, which is anticipated to connect Spring Place Park to the south with New Harvest Park to the northwest, sorry. This is the basis for our recommendation. Happy to answer any questions you may have.
Ms. Hillman or maybe Director Brooks, what's the history with these big chunks of RB in an LDR area? I feel like we've talked about it once before, but I can't remember.
Mr. Reynolds might be able to speak to that. I think that the zoning's been there for a very long time, and probably when they updated the sector plans, they chose not to recognize that zoning. But Mr. Reynolds, you have more context?
My recollection is that the previous zoning ordinance to the current had RA and RB zoning flipped, where RB zoning was the lesser intense zone. And when the new zoning went into place, they just gave the less intense RB zone the new RB zone, which created a lot of out of character areas. I did look this up once. It's been quite a few years. I think that what I was told was correct or generally correct. So I think it was probably maybe a mistake, or maybe it was intentional. I'm not really sure, but that's my. So these are really old legacy zones that are just there.
Yeah, I mean, they don't, when you zoom out there and kind of look at where some of those other RB areas are, it doesn't make sense with any of the sector plans. So I guess my point is, I don't know, doesn't make sense.
I kind of have a dumb question, sorry. Jesse, everything makes total sense. In general, when we're looking at, I understand that we're looking at the applications with the ordinances or whatever that was in place at the time the application was filed. I get that. But we know that there's the new land use plan. And so when we mention the new plan, are we supposed to try to make everything kind of mesh as we go forward? Or are we trying to just be aware of what's coming, and it's just kind of that these residential areas are going to be congruent anyway? Does that make sense? How am I supposed to think about this?
That's a very good question. Since we haven't updated our plan in 20 years, it's a little bit of new territory for everybody. So I don't think it's a dumb question at all. It's one that we've struggled with. We just feel like it's very important for you all to know what's coming, and you can take that into consideration in your deliberations. And I'm certain that County Commission will as well. Is that helpful? Oh, okay.
So I've got kind of a follow similar to that, I guess. But in looking at the future plan, or it's really today's plan, but it's in the urban growth boundary, though. I mean, there's quite a bit of that. I mean, I guess to me, and I was getting ready to try to look up what the actual wording was for the urban side, but I would think it borders the city, and, urban is going to lean more towards higher density, even more so than the planned growth area. Am I assuming that correctly, or in the urban, you would see more density in urban zoning classification or planned growth?
I think in general, we would like to see more intense development where there's infrastructure to support it, and you'll generally find that in the more urban areas or planned growth areas. Okay. Thank you, Jesse. We'll move on to agenda item number 10. Oh, sorry, I missed one. Oh, yeah, Scott Smith. 27.
So this is item 27, 4Q24RZ, 4H24PA, 4J24SP. The subject property for this rezoning includes 3 parcels for a total of 15.07 acres. Much of this acreage is in the Fourth Creek floodway and floodplain. It accesses Lions Bend Road, which is a major collector street near its intersection with South North Shore Drive to the west, which is a major arterial street. It's located across Fourth Creek from Lakeshore Park. It's also on the city-county jurisdiction boundary, which you can see in yellow. The request is to rezone this area from RN1 to RN3. The floodplain and hillside protection zoning overlays would be retained. The rezoning requires a land use amendment to the Southwest County Sector Plan, the West City Sector Plan, and the one-year plan from low-density residential and public parks and refuges to medium-density residential. The water, hillside protection, and stream protection areas would also be retained. With the zoning map, you can see that the properties along Lions Bend Road are zoned agricultural or low-density residential. There is more intensive zoning across South North Shore Drive with RN5 townhouse developments. There's also RB general residential rezoning to the southwest, though that's not reflective of the actual residential build out there. The residential land use classifications for this area are pretty much exclusively low-density residential or rural residential. The requested medium-density residential land use would be out of place in this expansive low-density area. It's also noteworthy that in the hydrology section of the West City Sector Plan, it specifically calls out Fourth Creek as the waterway that is most prone to flooding in that sector. Aside from a couple townhouse developments to the west that were built in the early 90s, most of this area is single-family residential. On Lions Bend Road in particular, virtually all residences are single-family and lots are typically an acre or more in size and heavily wooded. In the current aerial image, you can see how much of this property is consumed by Fourth Creek. This image shows the TVA water level drawdown for fall and winter, but you can follow that shoreline to imagine how it is currently. And in this 1935 aerial to the in the upper right-hand corner, you can see that this lot was all once land before TVA dams and upstream development changed the hydrology of Fourth Creek. At Lakeshore Park, you'll notice the new baseball fields that have been developed as part of their master plan improvements. Lakeshore Park welcomes over 1 million visitors each year. It's a major regional attraction. These ongoing changes to the park provide many benefits for the broader Knoxville and Knox County community, but there have been concerns expressed by immediately surrounding residents about noise and light impacts of developments like the sports complex. So the subject property being right next to these fields was a consideration in this rezoning review. While you can see more intensive residential development along the major arterial street, Lions Bend Road remains sparsely populated and very natural. This FEMA flood map shows the majority of the property is in the floodway in the 100-year floodplain. I discussed this property with plans and review and inspection staff as well as city engineering and learned that even with the flood-prone and waterway conditions there, technically about 5 acres could be considered as lot area to be counted towards the intensity standards for residential development. Meaning up to 72 townhouses could be considered here under RN3 through special use review. Staff are recommending denial of RN3 zoning and the medium density residential land use classification. The 2021 North Shore Drive corridor study found that Lions Bend Road heading towards South North Shore Drive has a current level of service rating of E, which means that there is unstable traffic flow with considerable delay. A signal was recommended for this intersection, but no improvements are slated to occur at this time. The study states that with future growth, the level of service will deteriorate to a level F, as shown in this image. This is also a vulnerable flood-prone area where more intensive residential zoning does not make practical sense. If there are concerns about noxious impacts of new recreation fields at Lakeshore Park on surrounding residents, then increasing the potential number of residents abutting those sports fields is not appropriate. Indeed, in the applicant's own letter of rebuttal to our decision, it appears that these new baseball fields may have played a role in motivating the applicant to move away from their property. The MDR classification would be incongruous with the surrounding land use plan, which is almost entirely low-density residential or rural residential. The property also doesn't meet all of the location criteria for MDR, which includes access to transit and sidewalk infrastructure. Lastly, the upzoning of this property violates at least 3 development policies in the general plan. Those include Policy 7.5 to protect the natural drainage systems associated with floodways and floodplains, Policy 11.1 to use environmental constraints and other factors to set standards for densities of residential development, and 9.3 to ensure the context of new development does not impact existing neighborhoods. And in response to the applicant's letter requesting approval of this request, it does mention a note in the staff report acknowledging an overall increase in population and housing demand as justification enough for approval. If that alone warranted an upzoning, regardless of context, then we would never have a basis to deny one. But considering traffic, hydrology, this new major sports complex, and surrounding residential character, it's clear that upzoning this particular property may not be warranted. And these are our reasons for recommending denial. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Got a couple questions. So that bridge on that, I guess when you're looking at it, the east side that goes to the KUB wastewater, right? That's not, that doesn't connect to the park, to Lakeshore Park, right? There's no access through there? No.
It appears to connect to the sewage treatment plant.
Right. So in looking at you said how many potential townhomes at maximum intensity, 72 or 6 or something, right?
Yeah, and looking at just the definition of lot area and lot area alone, 5 acres would permit consideration of 72 townhouses.
Okay. I guess then could you or maybe Director Brooks explain to us what has happened with our one-year plan and our land use classification table for LDR and MDR in the consideration of RN3? Because if that would have passed council, then a plan amendment wouldn't be required for RN3, correct?
At the time that this application was received, the one-year plan had not been updated.
Okay.
City Council ultimately determined that RN3 is not appropriate in low-density residential and that RN5 can be considered in medium-density residential.
Okay, thanks.
Can you help me with, I do remember I've worked with Director Snowden on the North Shore Corridor study, and I know that this intersection was contemplated for intersection improvement, so I do know that that is an issue. The condo development across the street, I guess that would be the west side of North Shore there, immediately across the street. What's that developed at? Do you know?
The ones that were developed in the early 90s?
Yeah, I guess. Because I know there's a condo complex right across the street there from the intersection.
Chris, are you talking about the one that we approved an extension to?
No, that was a separate, I mean, it was adjacent to that, but those were single-family detached. These are condos.
It's the Westlands, correct?
Yeah.
You think it was PR5? It was RP1 up to 5. It was RP1 up to 5 dwelling units an acre. And we assume it was built out close to that.
Thank you.
Any questions?
You mentioned something about disturbing natural waterways, but is there consideration for that in the fact that this is not what it was naturally historically looked like? Like it seems like this is a result of downstream adjustments, the amount of this that is floodplain. Is there any consideration in those plans for historic waterways?
The policy you're talking about is to protect natural drainage systems associated with floodways and floodplains. So you could interpret that to mean, any altered waterway does not count, but that may include all of our waterways to some extent.
And if they were to build out in this within the floodplain area there, is there a limit of how far construction could go within these areas?
Yeah, I'll defer to Joshua with city engineering, but I know that there's riparian buffer and TVA considerations.
Yeah, I would say that ultimately the maximum restriction would be the summer pool area, which I believe is an 813-foot contour. And the closer you get to that, it's still possible to develop, but it's harder and harder. You have the riparian buffer zone, which is 60 feet from that 813 contour, which can get administrative or approval from the engineering director. Then there's the flowage easement, which is at 822. They could technically go past that, but they'd have to go to TVA and do a no-rise study. And then any development in the floodplain would have to be elevated, I believe 1 foot above the 500. In this case, it's kind of a weird situation in that it's not a main river, but it's heavily affected by backwaters. So we haven't been able to get into the details to figure out exactly which rules would apply. But so I guess the short answer to the question, 813 is the maximum, but depending on how much money they want to spend, they could get closer and closer.
And that's 813, but then there's still a 60-foot setback from the 813, right?
Yeah, there's a 60-foot setback that if they could still get into that, but it would just, there's more hurdles and challenges to do that.
Okay. Thanks.
Thank you, Jesse. Now we'll move on to item number 10, 4N24RZ Masana Investments.
Can I ask a question on that lake? Are you saying that they can build lower than the 820 contour line?
Technically, it'd be very difficult. They would have to do a no-rise study and go through TVA, which, admittedly would greatly reduce what they could do in there, but there's plenty of developments that have developed in those areas.
Where they've gone and essentially brought it up?
Yeah, they have to show that they're not affecting the elevation of the floodplain up or downstream. And so usually that's cutting away from somewhere else on site and doing balance.
Thank you.
Okay, just wanted to run through this application real quick. 4N24RZ was postponed last month. Staff's previous recommendation was to approve planned residential up to 1 dwelling unit per acre. The applicant is requesting 5 dwelling units per acre. And the let me get my pointer on. So you can see here that the property is just off of West Emery Road. This is Black's Ferry Road. It's currently an agricultural zone property. It is cleared, and it's adjacent to planned residential up to 4. Black's Ferry Road, for the most part, is still agriculturally zoned. There's a couple of outliers. There's a small RA zone property, and again up the road, and then there's a planned residential up to 3 dwelling units per acre. It's an 18-unit development, I believe. So it's currently rural residential. You can see around it, there's a lot of single family. All these single family developments, with the exception of the smaller development up Blacks Ferry Road, has connection back to West Emory Road. This property only has access to Blacks Ferry Road. Again, here's the zoning. Plan residential to 4 is adjacent, only has access to West Emory, and was specifically prohibited from accessing Blacks Ferry Road. There's a small piece of legacy CA zoning at the corner of Blacks Ferry Road and West Emory. It's not used for commercial purposes. Matter of fact, the part of this planned residential development here rezoned some CA property back to planned residential. Sector plan is all low-density residential in this area with some hillside protection. I don't have a slide for it, but the future land use map is suburban residential. Actually, it might be regional. It might be.
It's rural commercial. I mean, not rural commercial, it's rural conservation.
Yes, thank you, rural conservation. Yeah, it didn't sound right. And rural conservation would allow consideration of up to 5 dwelling units per acre, just like the low-density residential does now. So there's really no change from that density standpoint. So there is a little bit of hillside protection on this property. You see it's predominantly green. It's kind of smack dab here in the middle of the property. So most of it is 0 to 15% grades. There's a little bit of 15 to 25% grade in yellow, and then some little outlier steeper grades. And when you look at the aerial, which this red area is pretty much the hillside protection area, it's all been farmed, it's all been cleared, so it's really not much of a hillside area other than it does have some steeper slopes. The dashed blue lines indicate where the streams come, where there are blue line streams across the property according to our base map. Along the frontage of the property, really it only crosses the 2 access points that go out to Blacks Ferry Road. That is much more a pronounced drainage area and might be a stream. The other blue line stream or blue line that crosses the property is much less pronounced, but it is there and would need to be studied as part of a development plan. Blacks Ferry Road is a concern. It is about 16 to 18 feet wide now, but then going back to the Blacks Ferry Road intersection, sight distance is very challenged here and as a safety concern. Something that would need to be looked at with development of this property would be improvements to Blacks Ferry Road and potentially this intersection. The star you see on the map here is approximately where this car is. The red line is the county's minimum sight distance, which is much further away than the intersection. The blue line is, I can't get to my note on that. I can't remember what the blue line was. It was a month ago that I created the slide. But in either case, it's sight distance is a problem and needs to be looked at and seriously considered with further development on Blacks Ferry Road. So as I mentioned, we have changed our recommendation to 4 dwelling units per acre. I mean, it is consistent with the land use plan, but development on this road will require improvements. So as long as those improvements happen, the 4 dwelling units per acre is consistent with the area, and that's what we're changed our recommendation on.
You said as long as the improvements happen.
Well, improvements do need to happen. Director Stoughton might be able to address how the county would be able to ensure that those things happen. And
Sure, Mike, be glad to. Yeah, the county has an ordinance that any off-site improvements required by Knox County or this body is codified in an MOU that then is approved subsequently by County Commission. So I've actually been talking to the Tennessee Department of Transportation because Emory Road's their facility, and they're doing an analysis to determine what they would anticipate, and then depending on the trips generated, we would have some sort of prorated version of, what the developer would be responsible before versus what the background traffic would generate. And then that cost share agreement would then go forward and be considered and approved by the county commission prior to the development moving forward.
Thanks. I'm just trying to understand in terms of the recommendation that staff made that it's for assuming that the improvements are made. So I guess what happens if they aren't?
Yeah, the MOU would codify the leverage the county would have. Like we wouldn't issue a grading permit, or we wouldn't, approve a plat, or there would be some kind of trigger for us to hold that would be codified and be understood and transparent for not only the county but the developer on the front end.
So I guess a clarification on that as well, as we're moving into the new plan, that would normally get picked up at a development plan review or something like that, correct? That you would enter into an MOU, I would think. But as we're moving into the new land use plan and the sector plans are being replaced, and there won't be a need, is that, because a lot of that stuff will be used by right. So it doesn't get approved by a vote, but does that still just get reviewed by engineering? And am I getting ahead of myself here a little bit? I don't know.
Well,
it might be just confusing.
We're still operating under our current zoning code, and the residential zone that we see most frequently is the planned residential. So you all will continue to see those until the time that if and when that particular zone gets revised.
So it'll be coming back through as a development plan and a concept plan?
Correct.
Okay.
Yes.
And that's when that gets reviewed and all that happens. Great. Thank you.
And anything with 6 lots or more will be a concept plan that'll come before the body. Okay.
All right, we have one more to go. Number 19.
Okay. I wanted to discuss this with y'all because it does include a condition about disturbance that went through. But the Planning Commission made the recommendation for the land disturbance limitation, and then the County Commission approved it. This development does go outside of those boundaries a little bit, but as staff, we're recommending approval. So I just wanted to just go through our rationale for believing that this is acceptable and is in the general and just generally the project. So they are requesting 103 units. I'm going to just zoom out real quick. So this is the one on High School Road. If you're familiar with High School Road, it's north of West Emory Road, west of the interstate, as you're going to like the northern part of the county towards High School, if you know where that is. As you can see, Emory Road is down in the interchange, down in the far right hand corner of this image. Existing land uses around this is pretty much all rural residential, rural residential, single family residential, or agricultural uses. This is the 2024 aerial for the property. You can see where the disturbance is most prevalent in the middle of the site. That's where the development will primarily be located. So it is only a very small portion of the property. There'll be a lot of leftover buffers to adjacent properties. And the issue comes in, so it's kind of hard to see on the aerial, but there's a red dashed line that outlines this, where the disturbance limitation is. Pretty much what you see on the south side as disturbed, and then everything north of that back towards High School can be disturbed. The 2014 aerial clearly shows that this property was disturbed entirely before. So there's a very small portion of the property of tree line near High School Road that was not disturbed, and it's still there. What the development is doing is they're kind of pushing back just a little bit further into this already disturbed area outside of the disturbance line, so they don't have to grade more towards the front of the property. and then put more, I guess, potential for disturbance of the trees that actually are left towards high school. And since the backside of the property was disturbed previously as well, staff, we felt it was more appropriate to go ahead and let them continue towards the back of the property where there's just a lot of buffer between them and the adjacent properties than trying to force the development back towards high school where there's grading issues. I'm going to flip back real quick just to the beginning again. I just wanted to run through a couple of the variances and alternative design standards. Another aspect of the property or of the project. We are asking for a right-of-way stub out, which they're providing to the adjacent property to the north. They're having to push their entrance all the way to the north, to their southern lot, north, like southeast property line. Basically, the adjacent property could never have access without variances, and they would have to push their entrance right up against theirs if it ever got developed. So we're asking for the right-of-way stub out, which they're providing, so that they can connect into this proposed public road. Every single horizontal curve in this project, they are asking for a reduction from the 250-foot minimum to, I think, 110-foot radius might be the smallest, like up here in these turns. But the other horizontal curves towards their entrance is really just to try to reduce disturbance and to get up the hill. They are requesting a 15% grade in this portion of their entrance road, a 22-foot wide pavement width to help, again, to reduce the disturbance. There's a horizontal, not a horizontal curve, a intersection grade alternative design standard at the entrance too. So basically, all of it is because of the topography of the issues on the site. There's a large power line easement on the west side of the property. Everything's kind of getting compressed, which is the cause of these requests. And staff is supporting all of them. I just wanted to point them out. As mentioned, staff is supporting everything. We're recommending approval with the noted conditions in the staff report. If you have any questions, I'll be happy to answer.
I've got a couple of questions because I know I'm a big proponent of trying to keep the area that it appears to have refurbished itself in the 10 years from the 2014 to 2024, which is a great thing. So it's a bit disappointing to say, well, it's been cleared off at some point in the past, so let's just extend it there, even though we had already said it wouldn't go beyond that. I understand that you were making some kind of compromises based upon what you described in terms of where it is positioned on the property. Mm-hmm. I guess my question is, one, at what point in the process was that decision made? That's really for my own edification.
When the applicant submitted, so I guess a first round of comments asked for an aerial showing their plan on top of the land disturbance limitation. And that's when we realized that they were extending beyond it. And then we had a conversation with staff like, well, they can move this forward. It's going to take a lot more grading on the front side of the site. And is that really the intent of what Planning Commission wanted? Because there was discussion of, well, they're going to have to bring an access road in. We don't know where that access road is going to be yet on the north side of the site. So we don't want to limit them to just the driveway coming through, from High School Road back to their site. That may not work. So we felt it was consistent with the intent of the condition to minimize disturbance as much as possible, but also try to maintain on the High School Road side of the property as well. I was trying to balance that part of it.
The other question is, was there ever part of the discussion that if the density that they were after was going to require the extension into the area that has refurbished itself over the last 10 years, that that density might need to be trimmed as opposed to trimming the trees?
Well,
This, just
yeah,
again, for my own learning.
That was the staff's recommendation, I think, was 2 dwelling units per acre, and it was ultimately approved at 3 dwelling units per acre. So that's what they can ask for. If they, the Planning Commission has the authority to say, well, sorry, you can't go back, further onto the site. If that's what you choose to do, they might just decide to move everything forward again. So I think ultimately they can get the number of units that they're wanting to build. It's just a matter of how they shift the units on the site.
Thank you, Mike. Is there anything else?
Any other
items?
matters that commission would like to bring up?
Just one real quick thing. I noticed the agenda PDF links are not working. So I'm not sure if that's something that could be fixed before Thursday, but it would be amazing if so.
Which agenda, like our actual, the full agenda or the
The
agenda review?
PDF, both the agenda review and the full agenda PDF. Neither of those, the links go to like a.
Does it go to like a, yeah, I think that Amy,
Okay, we'll double check that. That shouldn't be the case. We'll get that fixed ASAP. Yeah. Okay, we'll investigate what's going on.
Any other items? We're adjourned.
Josh changed that a few